Okay. Hi, everyone. So today I thought a cool topic to talk about would be prompt dependency. So the past couple of months, for some reason, I've been getting more clients who are prompt dependent. Specifically, they are very prompt dependent for their mans. So they do have the skill to request for things, but they just stare at you and they wait for an indirect prompt. So like, what do you want? Then they would request, right? So that problem led me to think like, okay, maybe we can talk about prompt dependency this time around. So today, I'll be going over a paper by Gorgon and Kodak from 2019. So it's from 5 years ago, not super recent. But I do really think this is a good paper because it gives like a starting point for us clinicians who struggle with clients who have prompt dependency. So let's just start. Maybe I can start with asking everyone here, do you guys have clients who are prompt dependent or have experience with clients who are very prompt dependent? And what are some things that you guys tried to do with these clients?
I'll start first, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. Recently, I'm not seeing any clients like in person, but I supervise clinicians, and then from and plus from my previous experience, the prompt dependency, it's usually like what do you say? It's also some faults from the therapist also. We tend to want their like success. So what we do is like we do like small like gestures or even the how we look at things. It might be something that makes our clients prompt dependent. So what I try to do is just for me personally, I try to be very conscious of how my body language is. And also, I tell my trainees also about those things. And I try to vary my reinforcement by making sure that when it's completely done without prompt, or when the client shows like efforts to not be dependent on the prompt, I make sure that they get more reinforcement. Yeah, that's the
Mm,
things I do. Mhm.
nice.
Every
Yeah. Go ahead. Okay, cool. That's super cool. I agree though, like prompt dependency doesn't just come out like out of nowhere. It's like I feel like it's learned. I think it's especially difficult for me personally. The clients who are prompt dependent are the ones who only come to the clinic like twice a week. Like I see them so little, and it's so interesting to see like parents would say this kid is prompt dependent at home, but then we don't see it in the clinic, and then over time that prompt dependency like seeps into like our sessions too. So yeah, I definitely think the way we administer like trials and how we interact with the clients definitely play a role. So let me start with the introduction. So prompt dependency is when the participant consistent is consistently waiting for a prompt before they engage in something. So an example would be like they would only wash their hands if the adults ask, "Oh, what do you need before you leave the bathroom?" Or they would only open the fridge if the adult gives them like a nod or something like that. So previously in literature, we know that there are some interventions that we use to prevent the development of prompt dependency. So the first one is differential reinforcement. So like what GN shared previously, like what she did, where she gives maybe greater reinforcer for independence and then less for responses that are prompted. For example, Cividini, Moda, and Ahern in 2013, they did like a research or like a study on the use of differential reinforcement to produce mastery for participants. And they found what they did in the study was they compared um, three treatments where they compared non-differential reinforcement, where they gave reinforcer, like the same level of reinforcer for both prompted and unprompted, and then a high moderate preference reinforcer condition where they give higher reinforcer for independent responses, and then gave lesser or more moderate reinforcer for prompted responses. And the third condition is where they gave high reinforcer for independent and did not provide any reinforcer for prompted responses. And what they found is super interesting. I think like this is we probably guessed this, but each child is different. So they found that the results for each participant is different. The second condition, which is the high moderate preference reinforcer condition, was most efficacious. So it worked for 4 participants. And obviously, I think we might have been able to guess, but the non-differential reinforcement condition did not work at all because the participants weren't able to discriminate like which response was more desired versus the other. And aside from differential reinforcement, the second type of intervention that is commonly used to prevent the development of prompt dependency is prompt fading. So this is a study by Bourret et al. In 2004. And what they did here is they gradually faded out parts of the prompt until they got the participant to mand independently. So in this study in particular, the participant only manded when a non-specific prompt was presented. So for example, he only asked for things if the therapist or parent said, hey, if you want this, you can ask me for it. That's the only scenario he would ask. And what they did was they shortened the prompt until it becomes nothing. And then they found that by doing that, the participants eventually consistently engaged in independent mands. And then the third method that is commonly used to prevent the development of prompt dependency is unlimited delay to prompts. So for this intervention, what you do is you just wait for an extended period of time until the kid or the client responds. So you're not fading out prompts, you're just waiting until they respond. So this study is very old, and it's Waltz et al. In 84. So they compared forward and hold task chaining with progressive or unlimited delays to prompt. And they found that despite producing a lot of errors, this method did take the least training time. However, from this study, it's still unclear whether or not it's effective in promoting independent responding. So when I read about this intervention specifically, unlimited delay to prompts, it reminded me of previous clients I've had in previous clinics where the BCBAs literally just wait for the kid to emit a response. So this reminded me of a time in one clinic where I was instructed to sit and wait for a kid to say attack response for like an hour. And he eventually said it, but it was a very long time, right? I think in that scenario, Yeah, it was really hard because it was a vocal response and you can't really prompt a vocal response, right? So I did understand why this method was chosen. But I think this method in particular is so, I'll get to this like by the end. Spoiler alert, at the end, the results is like it depends on the client. So you have to do an assessment for each client. But I tried doing this method with one client and I found that using this intervention actually evoked problem behavior. So it's so important for us to like do these like assessments for instruction, for the delivery of instruction. So this study, so Dr. Kodak and her student Ella Gorgon, they wanted to do an extension of the study because the previous studies that I talked about, they the clients did not have a long history of prompt dependency. So what they want to do in this particular paper is to see if these interventions work for clients who have had like a long history already. So let me just start with the methods and then we can go to the following parts. So this study had 3 participants. The participants range from 5 years old to 16-year-old, diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder or developmental disability, and their parents or their service providers reported to the researchers that they have a long history of prompt dependence. We'll talk more about this, but when choosing tasks to teach in this study in particular, they used interview methods. So they asked the parents and service providers to just tell them like what are some tasks that they need prompting on. And then the criteria is if they needed 80% or more, if they needed prompts for 80% or more of their responses across 2 consecutive sessions, then in a prompt dependence assessment, then those skills would be included in the study. We'll talk more about the prompt dependence assessment in the following slides. So let me just introduce you guys to our participants in the study. There are three individuals. The first one is Ralph. Ralph is 16. The skills that were identified that needed prompting were laundry skills and microwaving meals. So what the parents and the service providers were experiencing is after each step of the task analysis, he would only do the next step if they said, then what? What's next? So what's really interesting with this client or with this participant is, like Gian said, right? It depends on learning history. So he wasn't prompt dependent with one therapist, but he was prompt dependent with everyone else because only one therapist put his man for prompt on extinction. So this one therapist, when Raf asked what next, he would just like stay still because he knew that Raf had the skill in his repertoire, whereas other therapists, they were prompting him. Previously, RAF received differential reinforcement and extended response interval to treat this prompt dependency. Our second participant is Kenny. He is 14. His skills that were prompt dependent are asking for preferred items and then describing things in his environment, so essentially tacting, and also personal hygiene tasks. Oh, sorry. My comment about only doing it with one service provider, that applies to Kenny, not Raf. Okay, so that's Kenny, not Raf. But yes, he also received differential reinforcement and extended response interval as treatment. Our last participant is Mario. He's the youngest. He's 5. He needed prompts. He was prompt dependent for academic responses, so like tabletop work, so tacting, LR, things like that, manding, and also daily activities of daily living. For Mario in particular, they observed that if Mario did not receive a prompt after the first response of no prompt, he will continue to have no response for the successive trials, but he would respond correctly if he received prompt for that first trial of the target. For him in particular, previously he received differential reinforcement as treatment. So this study, what they were measuring is independent correct response. So if the participant engaged in the target response independently before a specified amount of duration, so they would mark that as correct response. If the participants engage in the target response within 5 seconds of a prompt, they would mark that as prompted response. And if the participant answered wrongly, they would mark that as incorrect response. For this study in particular, they also measured the duration of session and also latency of response. Latency of response was recorded for the extended response interval condition only. So the condition where the researchers waited for the response. So prior to doing the treatment analysis, they did a prompt dependence assessment to identify what specific targets or what specific skills that they wanted to teach during the treatment analysis. And they used the prompt dependence assessment from Cividini, Moda, and Ahern from 2013. So they just replicated that assessment to choose the targets. Yes. So what they did is they assessed engagement in the nominated task. So from the previous interview, so they chose from there. For activities of daily living, one session is one activity of daily living. For tabletop or academic task, 12 trials was counted as one session. So what they did here, it's essentially like they were delivering the target using like least to most. So they would present the SD. They would give 5 seconds for the participant to respond. If they don't respond, they deliver the least intrusive prompt. If they still don't respond, they deliver the most intrusive prompt. If the participant engaged in the response, the target response, independently or prompted, they were given enthusiastic praise. So they did that with all the participants, and the criteria for the skills to be included in the treatment analysis is if the experimenter provided at least one prompt during the task across 80%, at least 80% of trials or steps in the behavior chain. So they did the TA only for RAF. Or if the participant engaged in 20% or fewer responses of opportunities, and if the prompted correct response occurred during at least 80% of opportunities across 2 sessions. So this was the criteria of how they chose what skills to teach during the treatment analysis. So after the participant gone through the prompt dependence assessment, they were able to identify these skills for the participants. For Ralph, the skills were washing and drying his laundry, cleaning the bathroom, making microwave meals, and the controlling prompt for these skills was vocal prompt. So that means during the assessment, the previous assessment, Ralph needed vocal prompts to be able to complete the steps. For Kenny and Mario, the skill was animal action tact. So tacting animal actions. And the controlling prompt was vocal model, so like a full vocal prompt. The controlling prompt was the prompt that produced a correct response during 80% of the assessment trials. To note that these skills during the duration of the study were not taught outside of these sessions. So they were not taught by their service providers outside the study. Okay, now we'll move on to the procedure portion. So prior to the treatment analysis, they did a preference assessment and a color preference assessment. So the preference assessment was conducted to identify what reinforcers to use during the treatment analysis. And the color preference assessment was used to identify what like a moderately preferred color, um, and pair that color with each condition. So I think like Henley does this also, where he pairs colors with different conditions, different treatment conditions. So I think that's what they're doing in this study also. For this study, they had 3 treatment conditions and 1 control. Like I said previously, they used condition correlated colored papers. And for each treatment condition, they had different targets, but these targets were similar in nature. So, for example, like Mario and what's his name? Kenny and Mario, for all 3 conditions, they did animal action tags, but the targets were different. However, the researchers made sure that they tried their best so that the animals that they used looked the same, that the syllables that were required from the participants were similar in number, and the type of prompt needed in the assessment were also similar. So how often did they conduct sessions during the study? They did 1 to 2 sessions of each condition per day. So a minimum of 3 sessions per day to a maximum of 6 sessions per day for 2 to 3 days per week. And 1 session consisted of 9 trials for Kenny and Mario, who were doing like the tabletop trials, and 12 to 13 steps of task analysis steps for Ralph. The mastery criteria is 80% or more independent correct responses for 2 consecutive sessions. So after the participants meet the mastery criteria, the researchers would stop teaching that target because they meet the mastery criteria already. However, they also had a criteria that they made to identify like when they should stop teaching the targets with a certain treatment. So if the condition requires double the amount of number of sessions compared to the most efficient condition, and there was no increasing trend in responding, the condition was continued. So the conditions, just to make sure everyone's on the same page, the conditions are the ones we talked about just now. So differential reinforcement, prompt fading, and also the extended period of waiting, and then a control. So for the design, they use an adapted alternating treatment design. What they did was they ran 1 condition of each intervention prior to conducting a second session of the conditions. So for example, they would wait until they ran a prompt fading, a differential reinforcement, and then an extended period session before they started like prompt dependent again. So they wouldn't do like prompt fading. Okay. And then they ran a control session 1 time every 3 sessions of each intervention session. If the target met discontinuation criteria, the target will be taught using the best treatment option. Okay, so this is where I talk more about the conditions. So during the baseline condition, what they did was if the participant independently responded correctly, they gave praise. And if they responded incorrectly, they had no feedback. Specifically for our participant who's doing like a task analysis, if if they responded incorrectly, the researcher would just complete the step for them, and they would wait 5 seconds for the participant to do the next step. For the differential reinforcement condition, they gave a preferred item based on the results of the preference assessment if they responded correctly independently, and they gave praise if they needed a prompt to respond. So for each condition, the researcher had like questions or goals. For the differential reinforcement condition, the question was they want to know if reinforcement conditioncies have an effect on levels of independent responding. And then this is the second condition, which is prompt fading. If they responded independently correctly, they were given a praise and a preferred item. If they did not respond within a specified time interval, the prompt was given. And if they responded correctly with a prompt, they were also given a preferred item and praise. So for prompt fading, they started with the most intrusive prompt and then they gradually faded that prompt, right? The criteria to fade the prompt is 80% or more correct with that specific prompt. So when they meet that criteria, they will be moved to a lesser prompt. And then the extended response interval, if they independently responded correctly, 10 seconds after the SD, they were given preferred item and praise. So the 10 seconds, how they came about this number is they just doubled the amount of the general 5-second rule, like how how we wait for 5 seconds for the client to respond. They just double that, and they also just followed previous studies who've used extended response interval as a treatment. If the client did not respond within the allotted time, or if they respond incorrectly, the trial is just discontinued. And then, like I said, they had a control condition, which they conducted after approximately 3 sessions of each of the intervention conditions. If it's the same as baseline, essentially. If they responded correctly, they were given praise. If they responded incorrectly, they were given no feedback. We can talk more about this. We're going to talk more about this later because it relates back to the results for Kenny. But essentially, now we're going to look at the results. Question, is this too small, like the graph? No? Okay. Cool. So, like my spoiler in the beginning of the presentation, everyone showed different results. So we're going to go over each participant individually. So first, we're going to go over Ralph's result. As a reminder, we were doing TA for Ralph, right? Activity of daily living. And then if you guys see here in the baseline condition, he was showing low to moderate correct responding. So just to orient you guys to the graphs, this applies to all the graphs moving forward. Our x-axis is the number of sessions, like session number, and our y-axis is the percentage of independent correct response. And to remind everyone, in general, I think for all of it, the mastery criteria is 80% or more responding. So we see here in the baseline, he was showing low to moderate correct responding. And then after that, for this, after this line right here, phase change line, this is where we start the treatment comparisons. We see that for the extended response interval, so triangle, follow my cursor, triangle. We start here. After 4 sessions, you see him increase in independent responding, right? And then next, we're going to look at the prompt fading. Prompt fading is circle here. He met criteria after 8 sessions. And if you guys see here, there's a number 1 and number 2. So at number 1 here, this is where they make the prompt lesser. So remember when I said they did like full and then partial and then more partial? So this is where they faded the prompt the first time, and then he met criteria, 80%, 2 consecutive with that full prompt. So they moved him to 1, and then he met criteria again, and then they moved him to the lesser prompt. So for prompt fading, he needed 8 sessions. And then for differential reinforcement, which is the diamond over here, it went up and then it went down and it went up and then it went down. It met discontinuation after 8 sessions. So because after 8 sessions, he did not show improvement, he did not meet the criteria, they stopped it, right? Because it was double of the most effective, which is 4. So they stopped it. And then after this line right here, what they did is they took those targets that were in the differential reinforcement condition, and they taught it again using the extended response interval, because that was most efficacious for Ralph. And what's really cool is that we see that Ralph only needed like 2 sessions for him to meet mastery criteria with the like most efficacious treatment for him. So I thought that was just super cool. Next, we're gonna look at Kenny's results. Here at baseline, for Kenny is the one of the 2 participants who we taught animal action tags, so tacting. So in the beginning, low to 0 levels of correct responding. So really no responding at all. And then for differential reinforcement, so the diamonds. Oh, it's really hard to see. Where is it?
I can't seem to see your cursor. Are you trying to like point to us with your cursor?
Yes, I've been pointing it with my cursor. Can you guys not see my cursor moving? Oh,
Not
sad.
really. I've just been trying to like follow. Okay, 8
Can you see it
sessions
now?
now. No, I can see it now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, sad. Okay. Thanks, Felicia. Okay, so I'm looking. So differential reinforcement is the diamonds right here. The diamonds, we see that he did 6 sessions to meet mastery criteria. And then prompt fading is the circles. So he started down here, and then he went up, and then he went down, then went up, and then gradually he met mastery criteria for nope. For prompt fading, he met discontinuation criteria, because if you see here, the number of sessions that they did was more than differential reinforcement. So they stopped it. But they still saw like an increasing trend, although it took longer. But they stopped it just because it took too long. And then for the expanded response interval, they just didn't, responding was just very rare for them. Eventually, and then for this Kenny participant, Kenny was observed responding incorrectly, which was interesting, right? It's not that he responded, but it was wrong, right? And because of that, after the extended response interval met discontinuation criteria, they taught the skill using differential reinforcement, but they added an error correction procedure to it because he was struggling even after they used differential reinforcement. So right here, so they used differential reinforcement. You see here, it's still very variable. He wasn't mastering it even after that number of sessions. And then they added error correction, and then he eventually got it at the end. For control condition, remained at 0. Yes. Let's see. Our last participant, Mario. At baseline, he showed 0 correct responses. And then here we still see like 0 responding. And then for the extended response interval, which is this one, he finally met criteria after 5 sessions. And then for prompt fading, right here, the circle one, he met criteria after 5 sessions also. Here we see they only needed to fade the prompt once before he met criteria. And then differential reinforcement, where is it? Here, the diamonds, he met criteria after 8 sessions. During the control condition, his responding was still low. So the study is pretty straightforward, but as I said in the beginning, each participant, they responded differently to the interventions, and it just gave me more push, I guess, to do assessments for like skills acquisition. I think in general, when we think about like assessments, we think about like for problem behavior and all that. But for me personally, during my training, like assessments for how we most effectively teach skills were very rarely used. So I really liked this study in particular because it really pushed me through to explore that idea. But yeah, essentially, here we see in sum, extended response interval was most efficacious and efficient for Raf and Mario. And then what's really interesting, because the study, they took latency data also, right? They found that as time goes by, the latency decreased. So at the end of it, the latency was 1.5 seconds. In the beginning, it was like very long, right? And then at the end, it was 1.5 seconds, which is very cool. And then they replicated the findings in Bourret et al. 2004, where prompt fading was also successful in treating pre-existing prompt dependency. So in the Bourret et al. Paper, it was like a case study. So it was only one participant. So here we see that the effects were replicated with 3 different participants. So that just solidifies that notion that prompt fading is effective. And differential reinforcement was also effective in treating pre-existing prompt dependency. So yeah, that was my presentation for today. I personally really like Tiffany Kodak in general as a researcher because she does a lot of work on assessments for how to teach, like things like that. So maybe now I can open the floor. We can have a discussion about maybe the study today. If you guys have any questions, I will try my best to answer. If not, I can get back to you via WhatsApp or something. Or if you have any other questions regarding like prompt fading, if you want to share your experiences with treating prompt dependency, I think that would be really cool also.
I actually have a clarifying question. Actually, is that okay?
Yeah.
I'd like to would it be okay to go back to that slide where they did an assessment? I just wasn't quite clear. Are they the objective of that assessment, is it to figure out what is the controlling prompt as well as determining which topics to teach? Is that the only 2 objectives that they're trying to reach?
Mm-hmm. So I think what they were trying to do, can you see it?
Yeah.
I think okay.
It's a little small, but
Okay. Wait. Let's see. Slideshow. Oops. Oh my gosh. Sorry, guys. Is it bigger now? Sorry.
yeah,
guys.
it's big. I can see it.
Okay. So I think for the assessment portion of it, yes, they were trying to figure out what skills to teach. They were trying to make sure that they were actually prompt dependent in those skills.
Okay.
So that's why they had these criterias, right? So if they needed at least 1 prompt during the task for at least 80% of trial and 20% or fewer responses.
Gotcha.
So they were just trying to confirm. And they were also trying to figure out the controlling prompt. You're right. Because how they ran this assessment is like least to most. So they tried using the least, so like maybe a partial vocal, and then they didn't respond with a partial vocal. I'm gonna try like a full vocal. And if the results showed that in most of the trials they needed a full vocal, they would use that prompt for the treatment analyses.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I guess for my experience, prompt dependency, I couldn't think of a case. I have cases where the child has faulty stimulus control, but that won't be prompt dependent, right? Yeah, so I think anybody else can take the floor while I keep on thinking.
Thanks, Felicia.
I just have one question for the controlling prompt. So they found out the controlling prompt is all vocal prompts. And then so when they went through the actual experiment, they still use the vocal prompt instead of trying to like transfer it to different prompts. Because when we see many experiments, many results show that vocal prompt is a prompt that is very hard to fade, right? So
Yes.
so but they still use that controlling prompt as the prompt in the experiment.
Yeah, so they still use the vocal prompt in the experiment. I wonder if it's because for Kenny and Mario, the skills that were identified is the animal action tact. And I think I might be wrong, but I think what they were trying to do is they were trying to like move so essentially prompts are just like the responses are controlled by the prompt, not the SD that we actually want, right? So I think they use the vocal prompt despite knowing that it's harder to remove, because that's what's going to evoke the target response that they want, I think. And then using like the prompt fading, they like move it. They try to like move the control over like another prompt. That's when I was reading the paper, that's what I thought. But I don't think they said anything about that though. Like they didn't elaborate on like vocal prompt being like hard to remove and all that.
Okay.
But yeah.
Yeah. And the experiment was really interesting. And all the graphs that you showed was interesting, especially like the first one that you mentioned, who did the daily living skills, and then how the most effective one, like using the most effective one that this kids learned within 2 sessions. That was interesting.
That was very
And
cool.
yeah, it was really cool. And I really like that this person actually tried to experiment, which like Tanya, like you said, like we h- she actually tried to figure out which one really works best for the kid, and then we can actually see through the three participants result that even when learning the same goal or similar goals, they have like different tactics of learning. So it was very interesting and something that we could also like supervise our supervisees and also our parents. Yeah.
I
Thank you.
agree. Thanks, GN. Yeah, I'm like super interested in this like realm of research. So like assessments for skills acquisition. Super cool.
Yeah, for the life of me, I would not have thought that extended response interval would be something that would be most efficacious. And here it is. And all three have, different treatments that are they're most efficacious for each and every one of them.
Yeah.
Hmm
No, it just shows like how it just emphasizes like how important it is for us to tailor all our like teaching methods for each client that we have. It's like a good reminder also.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
Tanya, you were gonna say something about evoking problem behavior for some kids with, yeah,
Oh yeah.
could you
Yes.
mention that?
This is not like part of the research. This is like just based on my experience. So one of the clients that I'm struggling with right now is he has severe problem behavior. He's 11. And unfortunately his parents only send him to us like not a lot. We see him like twice a week, which is given his condition, he needs like more intense therapy. Um, Also taking into consideration that he does not go to school, so he's home all day, and he doesn't have like an in-home therapist. So it's just him and his mom. So he's not really getting much, right? Aside from those 4 hours a week that he comes to the center. And he was doing great when we first took him. Yes, I'm not. I will be more than happy to share. But and then suddenly, the end of last year, he was waiting for prompts to even sit in his car. Like he would like look at you to like nod at him, and then he would sit. It got really bad. Not just sitting in his car, like even opening the fridge, even asking for things that he usually wants. That was all like he needed prompting for all of that. And I wasn't sure why that was happening at home. And then so I gave the mom like a presentation on like, hey, you do differential reinforcement, blah blah blah. Um to note, like maybe I didn't do like a particularly good job as to like making sure she's implementing it correctly. Like like she has like good fidelity and all that. But after a couple of weeks, he started doing that during our sessions. Like he tried doing that in our sessions. Um, we put that under extinction, but there were some trials, some skills that still were prom dependent. He was like putting on a fight, and then I just waited. I just told my therapist, let's try and wait for him. Let's not like he knows how to do this. We've seen him done it so many times before. Let's just ignore him when he is asking for a man. And then he would like hit his head for attention, I think because he wanted that prompt. So yeah, so that was a good learning opportunity for me, but also like telling me, okay, so the extended response interval does not work for this kid.
Yeah. Okay. Now I remember one of my. Now that you're saying he has all the skills and then suddenly would just stop, right? I had a student who is used to eating independently all by himself, and then suddenly he just wanted to have like a response by a parent whenever he wants to, he starts to scoop his food. He wanted his parent to say ah, and then parents would say ah, and then he started to put his the food inside his mouth, right? And so it got really bad where when he just would not eat anything unless the parent would say ah. And so at school what we tried was that, I suspect that it may be attention because he was looking at parents whenever that happened. And so we just we remove all attention, and we just sort of nudge his elbow to, sort of like nudge the food closer to his mouth, and then it worked like immediately. Again, like this kid has no child, well, there's some SIB but nowhere near, I think, whatever you're handling. But I guess some of the prompt dependencies also maybe has a function as well.
Mhm.
Like you were saying.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
No, I agree. I think after what happened with the client, the one that I shared with you guys, I like reflected and I was like, dude, does this kid have any like mans for attention? And then we, yeah. And then we talked about with the parents and all of that about like giving him higher amount of attention during more appropriate times and all that. Because what I was fearing also was the parent only paid attention to him when she was giving prompts. So like outside of that, she wasn't engaging with him. So I think that was one of my concerns too. But it's really hard with parents because like they tell you things and then you tell them things and then you try to take data for it, but I don't know. I don't know. You know? Yeah. Anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I also like I have like another prompt dependent client, and then he doesn't have SIB, but he's more verbal, so he can communicate with you. And with this client, I thought what was happening is he had aversion to making errors. So what we did with him, we did like a social story about like it's okay to make mistakes and things like that. But I don't know how how accurate that was. But yeah.
So have you for that client? I wonder if you've considered using different type of prompting system like PTD versus SLP. Like I usually use PTD for kids who has intense aversion towards making mistakes.
Oh my gosh, do you mind sharing what that is? I don't think I've
Yeah,
heard what ETD is.
progressive time delay, like constant time delay. Time delay, sorry, time delay procedure. Time delay procedure, friends. Sorry. For
Sorry,
some reason, my
I'm like, what
university
is
uses that abbreviation. I just realized that nobody have heard of that outside of Vanderbilt.
Oh, yes. No, yeah,
Mm,
definitely. For prompt dependent clients, what I do is I try not to use most least prompting and use
mm.
progressive time delay. Oh my gosh. What was the other one? PTD and what? What did you say?
As system of least prompt, SLP.
SLP.
SLP, not a speech language pathologist. Sorry.
Okay.
And there, CTD, there's the constant time delay. I don't know. Apparently, it's only people from our school knows what those are.
No, that's really cool. I'm like, what is that? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah.
You know what?
I've also used. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. If
I've
it's real into that one, go ahead first.
I've also used like textual prompt, which is much easier to fade out, and it had worked for one of my kiddo.
Yeah. My kid, I tried that too with this kid. Now he looks for the paper.
Nice.
I know.
I think he's just really wanting that attention, man.
Like he's at the stage where I faded all the text like a little left, so I just said, okay, let's just get rid of the paper. And he's looking for the paper, so now he's at the step where it's just a blank paper. So like I'm okay.
Smaller and smaller paper. Smaller and smaller paper.
The texts are good though. The textual
Mhm.
prompts, they're good for like groups, like expectation, expected behaviors, stuff like that. I find that they help me a lot in groups when I do group therapy. So those
Yeah.
are good. And you know what? I'd rather have them on the wall rather than go and verbally prompt them and then they start engaging in behaviors.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think like some prompts are like I think like when it comes to skill acquisition, like manding, tacting, yeah, I mean like we do need to reduce prompts to get them to become independent. But I think in some situation also, it's I think like but I don't know, like I find like when they're just so prompt dependent, like priming, for example, like when I have a kid, she absconds from the transport. So we have to like, when we get to this clinic, you're going to go into the clinic. We're going to go straight there. We're not going to go anywhere. We're going to straight there. You have to repeat that 3 times. So that's kind of that's prompts, right? But without that, there's a high chance of the absconding to occur. So like in that particular situation, Okay, how do I reduce that verbal prompt? Okay, visuals. Okay, let's try visuals. But then visuals are more, what's that word? Um, repot, apa sih? How do you say repot?
Repot.
More of a hassle.
Tedious, tedious.
There you go. It's a hassle.
All right, yeah.
Because they have to pull it out, and then in the midst of things they lose the pictures. So like, so I find like, okay, you know what, if the verbal prompt is the most easiest to do, then just do it
Yeah.
with the visuals. But yeah, I think like but that's interesting though, like if this study could be applied to that sort of behavior, you know like reinforcement, like without the prompts you get like your lollies, and with the prompts you just get a praise.
Yeah.
It's worth thinking about though, because it'd be nice. I mean, it would make everybody's life easier, I think, like if you don't, they know the expectation. But yeah, definitely I'll give this a thought about those implementing those with behaviors.
Yeah, I think it's super cool. I think it's so funny what you said about vocal prompts, Tanti, because I have a client who struggles with yes, definitely, but like showering. So even with like no vocal prompts, he had trouble um showering, like the step by step. It was really hard. And then someone like a BCBA suggested, you know what? Try doing a vocal prompt, see if it works. I know, like, I think like we've all been taught like don't do vocal prompts for like activities of daily living, especially,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But he's like, just try do it. Like it's better. Let's see if the prompt works. Because if the help doesn't work, it's not technically a prompt, right? So they said, just do it. And if it works, what you can do is you can record your voice and teach him how to play that recording.
That's a great idea. Great idea. Just put the button on, right? Yeah.
Like, you know
I
what?
love
You're
that
right.
idea. You need my voice this much. We'll record it. No problem.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
then also, like even if you use the vocal prompts, if the client himself can actually transfer that prompt to repeat by himself, then he can just use it as his own tactic, right? So I don't think like don't use vocal prompt at all, like because the client can get dependent. I don't think that works, but like just generally, I think it's a general kind of warning for people. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so cool. I never thought about like him repeating it on his own.
Yeah,
It's
like
very cool.
mumbling on his own, like repeating. Yeah, trying to. We do that too, right?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Does anyone have anything else? If not, I'd be happy to send the PowerPoint and also the paper to the group later.
Yeah. So if no one has anything else, we can just schedule for our next meeting on the WhatsApp and we can just finish our session today. Okay,
Mhm.
cool. All
Perfect.
right.
Thank you
Thank you,
so
Tanya.
Thank you,
much.
Tanya. Thank you.
Good weekend.
Have a good
Bye.
weekend.
Bye.
Bye.